On a frozen mountainside in 1959, 9 experienced hikers cut their way out of their tent from the inside and ran into a blizzard in the dark. Some were barefoot. It was 30 below zero. Every one of them died. And more than 60 years later, we still cannot agree on what they were running from. This is the Dyatlov Pass incident. 9 of the strongest young hikers in the Soviet Union found scattered across a snowy slope, some dead of cold, some with injuries that should not have been possible. By the end of this, you will understand what the search party found, the injuries investigators could not explain, and why even the modern answer, published just a few years ago, still does not fully close the case. Stay with me. They were students and graduates from a polytechnic institute in the Ural Mountains, skilled, certified mountaineers, led by a calm 23-year-old named Igor Dyatlov. In late January, 10 of them set out on a winter trek through the northern Urals. One turned back early sick. That small illness saved his life. The other 9 went on toward a peak the local Mansi people called something chilling: Dead Mountain. We know their last days in unusual detail because they kept diaries and cameras. The photographs show them laughing, building their camp, trudging through deep snow. The final frames are dim and strange. Then the record simply stops. They were due back by mid-February. When the date passed in silence, families pressed the institute and a search began. Search parties moved into the mountains in the last week of February. They followed the group's planned route up toward the pass, scanning the white emptiness for any sign. And high on the slope of Dead Mountain, against all logic, they found the tent. It was half-collapsed and buried in snow, but it was standing where no experienced hiker would camp, exposed on an open slope. Inside, everything was still there. Boots, coats, food laid out as if for a meal, and the tent had been cut open from the inside with a knife. Whatever happened, the hikers had not untied the entrance. They had sliced through the wall and fled into the night. Below the tent, the snow told a story. 8 or 9 sets of footprints led downhill toward the tree line, not the chaos of a stampede. Calm, even steps. And here was the detail that haunted everyone. The prints were made by people in socks or a single boot or bare feet. They had walked out into a killing cold, half-dressed, and they had not panicked. They had simply gone. At the edge of the forest, under a tall cedar tree, they found the first 2, stripped down to their underwear. Beside them, the remains of a small fire and branches broken off the cedar high up, as if someone had climbed it, desperate to look back toward the tent. Their hands were burned. They had tried to keep warm. They had failed. Between the cedar and the tent, 3 more bodies lay in a line, spaced out, frozen in the act of crawling back uphill, back toward the shelter they had cut themselves out of. One of them was Dyatlov. They had died of hypothermia trying to return to the tent. And for a while, the grim story seemed almost complete. Cold and panic and a terrible mistake. Then the snow melted and they found the others. It took until May to find the last 4. They were in a ravine under nearly 4 meters of snow, deeper in the forest. And these 4 were different from the rest. Better dressed, as if they had taken clothing from those who died first. But their bodies told a story that hypothermia could not. 2 of them had massive chest fractures. One had a fractured skull. The force required, doctors said, was comparable to a high-speed car crash, and yet there were almost no external wounds, no broken skin over the shattered bone, and one of the women was missing her eyes, her tongue, and part of her lips. The investigation, after months, reached a verdict that explained nothing. The hikers had died from, quote, a compelling natural force they were unable to overcome. The case was sealed. And then there were the details that made it worse. Traces of radiation on some of the clothing. skin that some witnesses described as strangely orange or tanned. Reports from other hikers, miles away, of glowing orbs of light in the sky that winter. None of it fit together. None of it was ever fully explained. For decades, the file sat closed and the theories multiplied in the dark. Some were wild. Secret military weapons tests hinted at by those lights in the sky. An attack by the local Mansi people, quickly ruled out as no other tracks were ever found. Even in the tabloids, a Yeti. But the more carefully you look, the more the exotic answers fall apart, and the harder the real question becomes. Why would 9 rational people flee their only shelter into the dark? For a long time, the obvious answer, an avalanche, was dismissed. The slope was too gentle. There were no classic signs of a slide. The tent was damaged but not crushed. The footprints below it were intact, undisturbed. To the investigators of 1959, an avalanche simply did not match the scene. And so the mystery hardened and stayed unsolved for 2 generations. Then in 2021, 2 scientists ran the numbers. Using models built partly from car crash simulations and the physics of snow, they showed how a small, delayed slab of snow, triggered by the way the hikers cut into the slope to pitch their tent and driven by fierce mountain winds, could have slid in the night. A slab heavy enough to crush a chest against the hard tent floor. It would explain the injuries. It would explain the panicked flight. For the first time, the science fit. But a model is not a confession. It still does not cleanly explain the radiation or the missing eyes and tongue, which skeptics attribute to ordinary decomposition and scavengers. It does not explain the lights in the sky, or why the verdict was so strange, or the faint sense that anyone who reads the files comes away with, that something is still missing. The avalanche may be the answer, but it does not feel like the whole answer. Maybe that is why this case grips us so tightly. There is no villain, no monster, just 9 capable people, a chain of small, reasonable decisions, and one night on a mountain that still refuses to give us a clean ending. Sometimes the most disturbing mystery is the one where nothing supernatural happened at all, and it is still not enough. 9 hikers, 1 slope, a tent cut open from the inside. The mountain kept its answer, and we are still climbing toward it. The next file we open lies under 2 miles of ancient ice. Subscribe so it finds you. This is Black Salt Ledger.